Thank you to the Civil War Roundtable Congress for having me here today. My name is Lisa Samia. This presentation is on Asia Booth Clarke and her never before seen letters, a series of 3 letters never before revealed until today. The letters were written by Asia between 1868 to 1875 from Europe to her former teacher at the Carmelite Convent in Baltimore, Maryland, to a Sister Teresa Sewell. Before I begin, a thanks to Sister Constance Fitzgerald, archivist of the Carmelite Convent in Baltimore, Maryland, to Andrea Lowenwatner of Historic Blenheim in Fairfax, Virginia, and to Dr. Terry Alford, historian, author, and well-known Booth authority. This presentation will explore the life of Asia Booth Clarke from her early life, young adulthood, marriage, her writings, and of course, the 3 letters. During the course of her life, it seems that in times of grief and despair, Asia would turn inward to her writings for solace. Not only will I explore the life of Asia, but I will take the letters and present a deeper meaning. As an artist and a poet, mindful it is never just words on a page, but reading into the words and feeling the emotion of the words being said. Our historians tell us the story of and the historical significance of our past, but they don't always explore the meaning of the event through the eyes and the hearts of those individuals who lived and breathed life just like us so many years ago. As a poet, that's what I do. In the reveal of these letters, I strive to bring them forward with humility and with respect for the author and to the Carmelite community of sisters. Unless all otherwise indicated, all referenced and quoted material comes from historian author Terry Alford's book, Fortune's Fool, The Life of John Wilkes Booth, and Asia Booth Clarke's The Unlocked Book, a memoir of John Wilkes Booth by his sister. Also, letters to Asia's lifelong friend, Jean Anderson, and of course, the letters to Sister Sewell. A little background on Asia Booth Clarke before we start. Asia was the second oldest daughter in the Booth family and was born, as with most of her siblings, on the Booth family farm in Bel Air, Maryland on November 20th, 1835. Interesting fact was that it would take many months before Mr. and Mrs. Booth chose a name for the child, being undecided whether to call her after the accomplished young actress, Sidney Cowell, Mrs. Bateman, who was a great favorite of Mr. and Mrs. Booth, or Aisha, in recollection of one of Mahomet's wives. At length, Junius wrote to his wife, Mary Ann, he was not present at the birth, called the little one Asia, in remembrance of that country where God first walked with man, and Frigga, because she came to us on a Friday, the day consecrated to the Norse goddess who presided over marriage and the home. She was, in fact, about 2.5 years older than her brother, John Wilkes. Her parents were from England. They immigrated to the United States in 1821. Her father, Junius, was a famous actor even before coming to the United States. He performed from the 1820s, around 1850s early, and made about $5,000 a year at times, which was a very comfortable sum. Asia had 2 older brothers, Junius and Edwin, who would also become actors, an older sister, Rosalie, and 2 younger brothers, John Wilkes and Joseph. We don't hear much from the Booths on Rosalie, just that she was kind and devoted to her mother and was adored by her younger brother, John. She was, in fact, around 15 years old when John Wilkes was born. A romance cut short as a young woman by her father, Junius, seems to have impacted her as to not to attempt another romantic adventure. Rosalie was also known to have scoliosis of the spine, which was a physical ailment. So, perhaps that also impacted her to not to try another romantic adventure. Asia's sister's Rosalie is mentioned in one of the letters, and Asia's description of her life is one of sadness yet without complaint. Asia, who was the Booth family chronicler, writer, and sometime poet, was close to her brothers Edwin and John Wilkes. Youngest brother Joseph would have severe bouts of melancholia, like the elder Booth, but would eventually become a doctor. Asia's father, the great actor Junius Brutus Booth, suffered with melancholia, which could have been innate, but was also fueled with his bouts of alcohol. He loved his children, but his difficult and mercurial behavior, loving one moment, cold and distant the next, would certainly be difficult for any child to navigate. Also, in 1833, the Booths lost 3 little children, Certainly those losses would have affected his behavior in some respect, and understandably so. In 1851, 1852, the elder Booth built Tudor Hall on the property at Bel Air, Maryland, which is a 1.5-story Gothic Revival home. This home is well preserved and owned by Harford County of Maryland. Unfortunately, the elder Booth died in November of 1852 while the home was still being built. I just want to take a second here. If you take a look, you'll see this balcony, okay? That balcony and that window there, that is the room of John Wilkes Booth. And we know that, and we know this is the east side of the house, because in the unlocked book, John Wilkes was to say, "No setting sun view for me. Let me see him rise," meaning he preferred not to see the end of the day, but to greet the beginning of the day, which is why we know this is east facing. The Booths also had a Baltimore City residence at 62 North Exeter Street in Baltimore, purchased in 1845, which was a middle-class city townhouse. Tree-lined streets with a grocer on one side, banker on the other. This residence is no longer standing. Having this city residence gave the Booth children a greater opportunity for their education. John Wilkes would go on to become a famous actor like his father Junius and older brothers Junius and Edwin, and of course, takes center stage as the assassin of President Abraham Lincoln. Asia would go on to marry the comedic actor and theater manager John Sleeper Clarke. John Sleeper Clarke would perform what was called low comedy or physical comedy, certainly a much different style from the Booth family actors, which were steeped in Shakespeare. She would go on to author 3 books. The first, Booth Memorials, Passages, Incidents, and Anecdotes in the Life of Junius Brutus Booth, the Elder. This book was published in 1866 and is about the acting life of her famous father. The second book was written in 1874, and this is while Asia was living in Europe, but was not published until 1838. And this is Asia's book, The Unlocked Book, a memoir of John Wilkes Booth by his sister, Asia Booth Clarke. This was a secret memoir. She had to hide it from her husband, John Sleeper. Asia's husband blamed the Booth family, especially John Wilkes, for his problems. So Asia wrote it in secret and gave it out of the family to have it published, which it was, but not till 1938. This is the longest and most extensive account of John Wilkes Booth by a family member. In 1868, Asia would leave the United States with her husband, John, and their children to reside in England. It is because of Asia that a picture of John in childhood and young manhood is so poignantly brought forth. Asia provides insights into Brother John and the emotional reminiscence of their time growing up at Tudor Hall in the mid-1850s when they were teenagers. In the relative isolation of the Maryland countryside, Asia and John became constant companions. Here they were lonely together, as Asia expressed it. Now, as to this memoir of her brother John, historians have been generally satisfied with her truthfulness. However, it's very important to remember that these writings are from memory and recollections, not a day-to-day diary event. And I believe it must have taken a great deal of fortitude and care for Asia to write this memoir of her brother. Mindful in this instance, it was written in secret with only her recollections to guide her. And her last book, The Elder and the Younger Booth, about her famous father and brother Edwin, published in 1882. It's generally understood that when one gives a presentation like this, it's either that the author has uncovered a new piece of history to bring to light, or that perhaps a new interpretation of existing material is coming forth. In past presentations, I've always said I do not have any newly bits of discovered history to share with you. However, this time I do. This presentation is on Asia Booth Clarke, specifically on the never before seen letters. I will look deeper into her possible meaning of these letters a bit later in this presentation. We'll also look into her early years. She had a romantic, restless nature, as well as stubborn, unrelenting side. And these were qualities that she shared with her brother, John. Brother and sister would remain close even after their lives moved towards and into early adulthood, as John pursued the family vocation of acting, and Asia became wife, mother, and writer as Asia Booth Clarke. Many of the letters written by John over the course of his lifetime were destroyed right after the assassination. I mean, again, it was not in your best interest to have anything of his laying around, certainly. As Asia says in her memoir, as she heartbreakingly pens, all written or printed material found in our possession, everything that bore his name was given up to the authorities. Not a vestige remains of aught that belonged to him. His books of music were stolen, seized, or savagely destroyed. Not even the little picture of himself hung over my baby's bed in the nursery. He had placed it there himself, saying, "Remember me, babies, in your prayers." There's not a lot of detail of facts about Asia's education. Along with brother Edwin, Joseph, and John, she would attend the school run by Susan Hyde in Baltimore. It was at the Hyde School that Asia would meet her future husband, John Sleeper Clarke. John would grow attached in friendship and business with Edwin. Then only about a bit of information about an unnamed college for young girls where she studied for an unknown amount of time. This was an all-girls school taught by men only. The next school Asia would enroll in was a school run by the Sisters of the Carmelite Convent in Baltimore. It was here she would receive her formal education, and its influence was profound. Again, the Booths were raised Episcopalians. At the time of John Wilkes Booth's death on April 26, 1865 in Port Royal, Virginia, it was noted that John Wilkes Booth had a gold medal around his neck, Agnus Dei, which is Latin for Lamb of God. It is to wonder if Asia gave John this Catholic medal, but there is nothing in history to support who actually gave it to him. However, in a letter dated May 22nd, 1865 from Philadelphia, 1 month after the assassination, Asia writes to her friend Jean Anderson, "I was shocked and grieved to see the names of Michael O'Loughlin and Samuel Arnold, which were John Wilkes Booth's childhood friends. I'm still some surprised to learn that all engaged in the plot are Roman Catholics. John Wilkes was of that faith preferably, and I was glad that he had fixed his faith on one religion, for he was always of a pious mind. And I won't speak of his qualities. Well, you knew him." I also wondered about the choice of the Carmelite convent school for Asia. Perhaps there were few school choices available, but perhaps it was due to Asia's parents' experience with the Carmelite convent while in Madeira, Spain, on their way to the United States in 1821. In her book, The Elder and the Younger Booth, she writes, "At the convent, Mrs. Booth did not understand the conversation between her husband and the fathers, it being in Latin, but afterwards she learned that he was invited by the prior to attend the midnight burial of a Carmelite, for which purpose he ascended the mountain again and alone." A bit more about the Carmelite school background. It opened in October of 1832, the Carmelite Sisters Academy for the Education of Young Ladies of all religious denominations, one of the first 4 such academies in the original states. For 20 years, 3 or 4 of the nuns, Sister Teresa, Juliana Sewall, chief among them, staffed the school. Asia had a literary mind and loved to write poetry. It was said Asia was a very smart woman by the by, stated one New York City columnist, educated, mathematical, and somewhat of a writer, and tremendously strong-minded. We'll see that come up in a couple of instances. When her brother John was born, their mother Mary Ann had a vision in which she believed he would die an early and unnatural death. She saw the word country in the fireplace flames. A glimpse here of a poem written by Asia to her mother on her birthday, trying to explain the meaning of the vision. The mother's vision. This is an excerpt. Written 1854, June 2nd by Asia Booth, Suffolk County, Maryland. "'Tween the passing night and the coming day, when all the house in slumber lay, a patient mother sat low near the fire, with that strength even nature cannot tire, nursing her fretful babe to sleep. Only the angels these records keep of mysterious love. I implore to know on this ghostly night, whether 'twill labor for wrong or right, for or against thee, the flame upleapt, like a wave of blood an avenging arm crept. into shape, and country shone out in the flame, which fading resolved to her boy's own name. God had answered love, impatient love. Asia could also be rigid and sensitive, where she would sulk at the smallest incident. These hours of self-inflicted torment were filled with anger against everyone, Asia wrote of herself. Her father would caution everyone to leave her alone on these occasions, since no reasoning would melt a sulky temper. Her personality is further revealed in her letters to her lifelong friend, Jean Anderson. Asia had an explosive side, and this was revealed in her attitude and open dislike of her sister-in-law, Mary Devlin Booth, wife of Edwin Booth. She writes to Jean on July 11th, 1859, from Philadelphia. To think that my brother, the best beloved of all, should occasion these bitter tears. Nor less in that long dreaded affair with Mary Devlin. No, I will not write the evil that I invoke on her. You know how I detest and despise the woman, an actress, not even second rate, yet the position is nothing to me. I think only of the bold-faced woman who can strut before a nightly audience, who can allow men of all kinds to caress and court her in a business way. And she underlines the word business. Jean, she wants his money in his name, a grand position for a poor girl. Her family's of the lowest Irish class living here in the city. I wanted to love Ned's wife, to let her be my sister, but I cannot stoop to that which I despise. Jean, if I were not worried over the consummation of this Devlin affair, I should certainly to that place of peace, the convent. And this statement here is so beautiful. All my life long, some loving hand has seemed beckoning me there. John Wilkes also warned of her marriage. Asia writes in 1859, Wilkes came from Richmond where he was fulfilling an engagement to be present at my wedding. Asia married John Sleeper Clarke in April of 1859 in Philadelphia. He returned to that city immediately after the wedding. He was not pleased with my marriage, and the strange words he whispered to me were, always bear in mind that you are a professional stepping stone. Our father's name is a power theatrical in the land. It is dour enough for any struggling actor. I'd like to stop here for just a moment and delve a little deeper into what is being said here. Mindful, it is never just words on a page. John did not like Asia's husband, John Sleeper. Even though he was in fact a successful comedic actor and later theater manager and owner, it was John Sleeper who helped John Wilkes secure the first step in his acting career, this at the Arch Street Theater in Philadelphia in 1857. On one occasion during the Civil War, John Wilkes actually attacked his brother-in-law for his defamation of the South and Southern leadership. All the family knew of John's fervor towards the South. This occasion was marked where John Wilkes was so incensed about his brother-in-law's remarks, it was said he leapt at his brother-in-law and tried to pull his head off. Now, that might seem a bit comical, but John Wilkes was very, very strong, and it took a few individuals to actually pull him off his brother-in-law. But there's something more I would like to explore about his comment of being a professional stepping stone. Perhaps in this warning to Asia, he not only perceived this quality in his future brother-in-law, perceived it and warned his sister that perhaps John Sleeper's intentions were not entirely for her affection, but rather for future advancement in the theatrical world. I think John Wilkes saw him as an opportunist. John Sleeper and Edwin would become successful theater managers and owners. It helps when you marry into the Booth family. Unfortunately, this prophetic warning would come back to Asia later in her marriage. She wrote to her brother Edwin while residing in England about the lack of affection from her husband and that he slept most nights at the theater and said he was leading a bachelor's life. And hauntingly to further this, in a letter to her friend Jean Anderson, Asia had written she had married John Sleeper Clarke, and clearly not in jest, to please her brother Edwin. You can see John Wilkes was not pleased at my marriage, and the strange words whispered to me were, always bear in mind that you are a professional stepping stone. It was a very strong statement, and it actually turned out he was correct. As to the Civil War and Asia's thoughts on her brother John, we hear from Asia to her friend Jean Anderson. John Wilkes is crazy or enthusiastic about joining for a soldier. And again, she added a sister's special insight. It has been his early ambition, perhaps his true vocation. Booth might have made a good soldier, fighting well and filling a cavalryman's grave by mid-war. but the conflict would go on without him. To fulfill an obligation to his mother that he considered sacred, he made a fateful decision that went against his nature. John Wilkes would later call himself a coward for not enlisting. Remember that when John Wilkes was acting on the stage in all those great Shakespearean plays, in some instances, he was playing a hero, but that was just play acting. When in the course of reality, he called himself a coward for not enlisting. However, we do know that John was in some way affiliated with the Confederacy. If he could not physically fight for the Confederacy, he would find a way to help. From her memoir, she says, "A man came here the other day for Dr. Booth. What does that mean? I fancied one who had known Joseph as a medical student at Philadelphia or with a Dr. Columbus de Vega at the South, but," and this is John speaking, "All right," he said lightly, "I am he, if to be a doctor means a dealer in quinine." She asked, "The drug the North says is more in requisitions than food for Southerners?" He said, "Yes." I knew now that my hero was a spy, a blockade runner, a rebel. I said the terrible words before my eyes and knew that each one meant death. I knew that he was today what he had been in childhood, an ardent lover of the South and her policy, an upholder of Southern principles. March 18th, 1865 was John's last appearance on the stage, Pescara in Washington, D.C., and she writes of the last time she saw her brother John. "As I sat on the sofa, he came and knelt down at my feet and laid his head in my lap. After a little time, during which I smoothed his black hair carelessly, he said, looking at my face, 'When will your child be born, my girl?' 'In 5 months, I think, or less.' 'I hope you will keep well and get stronger, dear.' Then, as we rose together, he kissed me very tenderly and said, 'God bless you, sister mine. Take care of yourself and try to be happy.' 'Oh, my boy,' I said, with all the anxiety of my heart, 'I shall never be happy till I see your face again.' Well, of course, she never did, for she says, 'There's no more to add. The rest is horror, fitter for a diary than for these pages.' Asia was expecting in the summer of 1865, and she had promised her brother John, if a boy, would name him after him. But of course, that was impossible after his most grievous act. And on August 20th, 1865, she delivered a set of twins, a boy and a girl. She named the boy Creston, who also grew up to be an actor, the child bearing a strong resemblance to his Uncle John. Within a year of the assassination, Asia would lose her first child, a twin girl called Lillian, born on August 20th. In a letter to Jean Anderson dated April 18th, 1866 from Philadelphia, she writes, "Since I wrote you last, I have endured all manner of trouble. I suppose Rose, her sister Rose, has told you, if she called and was proposed to doing, the death of my little Lily. It was a melancholy time and a sad, sad parting. I was taken quite ill nursing her and had to give her up to Grace and the doctors, being confined to my bed for weeks. It was a dreadful thing to have my Lily brought to my bedside in her little coffin, and then to hear the carriages go away one after the other and return without her. I think I am getting like poor mother. She says she is hardened to sorrow." Lillian's middle name, by the way, was Teresa. Asia would give us a glimpse into the pain that she and her family were submitted to right after the assassination in a book she wrote and was published in 1866. The book is called Booth Memorials, Passages, Incidents, and Anecdotes in the Life of Junius Brutus Booth the Elder. Here she cries out, "Calamity without precedent has fallen on our country. We, of all families, secure in domestic love and retirement, are stricken desolate. The name we would have enwreathed in laurels is dishonored by a son, his well-beloved, his bright boy, Absalom." Asia is referencing from the Bible, King David's third son, Absalom. John Wilkes was the third Booth son. The story of Absalom is that not only was he the handsomest man in the kingdom, John Wilkes was called the handsomest man in America, he in fact rose up against his own father, tried to steal his kingdom, whereupon he was not successful and ended up destroying himself. While this paragraph comes from her book, Booth Memorials, you'll notice it is in the second paragraph in the introduction, placed there on purpose, not to be missed, stating unequivocally this author's pain. You can see it right there. A calamity without precedent has fallen, right in the introduction. In the aftermath of the assassination, Asia says, "It was like the days of the Bastille in France. Arrests were made suddenly and in the dead of night. No reason or warning given, only let anyone breathe a sigh of doubt of the most innocent person. And arrest followed swift, and that incarceration meant to wait the law's leisure, innocent or guilty. Someone sent up by my servant a slip from a newspaper with the announcement that on hearing the news, Mrs. J.S. Clarke had gone mad and was at present confined at the asylum at West Philadelphia. North, east, and west, the papers teemed with the most preposterous adventures and eccentricities and ill deeds of the vile Booth family. The tongue of every man and woman was free to revile and insult us. She says, every man's hand was against us. I'm going to take just a moment here to focus on variations of this phrase, every man's hand was against us, which shows up in John Wilkes Booth writing as well as Asia. From the diary of John Wilkes Booth, an excerpt from the 12 days he was on the run after assassinating President Abraham Lincoln on April 21st, 1865, he wrote, after being hunted like a dog through swamps, woods, and last night being chased by gunboats till I was forced to return wet, cold, and starving with every man's hand against me, I am here in despair. She says, Edwin Booth's letters at this sad time were filled by reiterated suggestions for Clarke to dissolve all partnership with him. He must not be bound in any way to him whose name and fame were clouded. He must sever all connection with him theatrically and forever now. This was a generous offer made when he, Edwin Booth, had all the world against him. But he little knew how ungenerous an offer J.S. Clarke was about to make to one whom he sworn to keep faithful to under more solemn bonds than those of business. John Sleeper Clarke had asked for a divorce from Asia shortly after the assassination. The incomprehensible words of Wilkes Booth resounded through the years that followed this astounding, heart-sickening proposition. Bear in mind, you are only a professional stepping stone. There's an interesting usage of these phrases. Every man's hand was against us, with every man's hand against me, all the world against him. John Wilkes Booth's diary was written in April of 1865, Asia's memoir of her brother John, 1874. And it's interesting that John would use this phrase in his diary and that Asia would use variations of this phrase in her memoir of John. Again, it is never just words on a page. These phrases called to me to look a bit deeper and find a connection somehow. I thought from perhaps Shakespeare, but it comes from the Bible. From the King James Bible, Genesis chapter 16, verse 12 reads, and he shall be a wild man. His hand will be against every man, and every man's hand against him. And he shall dwell in the presence of all his brethren. King James Bible was authorized for use in the worship of the Episcopal Church. And again, the Booths were raised Episcopalians. Perhaps a coincidence that brother and sister would use a variation of this phrase in their writings. I understand it was a commonly used expression in those days. However, I found this connection extremely interesting, especially in that it was used during times of despair for both John and Asia. Just another common allele or gene they both shared. She writes, I love my brothers devotedly, but Wilkes and I had grown nearer in those late years at the farm where we were lonely together. My marriage, which he often urged me to free myself from, was becoming less pleasing to him. This and his professional pursuits separated us at long intervals. The doom that fell on him was not wrought from a maniac brain nor a wicked heart, nor from an irreligious soul or a degraded nature. I believe that with the kidnapping scheme, that was the original plan. John Wilkes and his conspirators were to kidnap President Abraham Lincoln, but obviously that was laid to rest after the surrender of the South. Although with curses, the cherished hope of saving those he would have died to serve. Asia ends her memoir of her brother John with a line from Shakespeare's Hamlet, so runs the world away, Act 3, Scene 2. In Hamlet, Act 3, Scene 2, Hamlet says, for some must watch while some must sleep, so runs the world away. It gave me pause as to try to decipher what Asia meant by so runs the world away, and why she chose this particular line to end her memoir of her brother John. Of all the lines in Shakespeare, all the tragedies, she uses this one. Why is that? What is she trying to tell us? Mindful again, it is never just words on a page. Well, perhaps it is not so much that John Wilkes Booth performed in so many Shakespearean tragedies It's that Asia is telling us that in the end, not only did John create the greatest of all American tragedies, he in fact became an American tragedy himself. And perhaps, just perhaps, this line of Shakespeare in a subliminal way was meant for her as well, as we learn more of her life in Europe and the tragedy yet to come. Asia would move to England with her husband John and her children in 1868, far away from the memory of John's horrible deed. Yet her life there was not happy. While her husband John's career flourished, lonely and increasingly ill with rheumatism, she grew to detest London. Husband and wife were growing apart. She wrote to her brother Edwin that Clarke had kept a private room at theater and often slept there. If he came home, it was late when all were asleep. He lives a life of mystery and silence as far as I'm concerned. He lives a free-going bachelor life and does what he likes. She believes some of Clarke's time was being shared with another woman. She says a bachelor in all but name. Clarke had limited involvement with their 9 babies. 3 additional children had been born after the move to England, daughter Joan and two others whose names are not known. All died. Again, Asia had written to her friend Jean she was getting hardened to sorrow like poor mother. But the pallor of grief was yet to surround Asia once more. The favorite child of both the parents, Edwin, became an officer in the British Merchant Navy. On December 10th, 1881, while on a voyage from Australia, he was lost at sea. He was just 20 years old. After everything that had happened in her life, her son Edwin's death was a devastating blow and spirit breaker for Asia. Yet, somehow, it seems to me that it was her devotion to her Catholic faith that somehow brought some semblance of solace in the years and the sadness in Europe. These letters will show her love of her faith, the Carmelite sisters, and her children. In a life that spanned from the small hamlet of Bel Air, Maryland, to the city of Baltimore, to the anguish of her brother's crime in Washington, D.C., to her life in Europe, and finally her burial in the family plot in Baltimore, it is her faith that she draws her strength and hope for her, children, and the Booth family. This is where we will pick up the 3 letters. The first one is dated September 8th, 1868, from London. This is to Sister Teresa Sewell of the Carmelite Sisters of Baltimore, Maryland. Dear sister, I have just received your letter and write again hurriedly to let you know that I have purchased breviaries, which is a liturgical book of daily hymns and prayers, and that a friend of ours will leave them in New York to be forwarded by express to you. I ordered them as soon as I heard he was going, as he had spent 2 weeks in Paris. The bookseller had time to send to Belgium. All the images and beautiful things used here in the churches are bought from Belgium. I am now afraid the books will not suit you. The first is smaller than I expected, but they tell me the new editions are all of that style, and they tried to procure an earlier edition of the larger print, but are not successful. Then I ordered red edges and a plain clasp because I thought you would prefer them plain. You will see the edges are gilded and the clasp highly brightened, but that will soon near dim if the type only suits. I hope to get them the size of the diurnal, which is a liturgy of the hours prayer and has 6 ribbons. It's a prayer book. But it's a liturgy, they call it, of the hours. And I was fearful that was of rather too small print. You will most likely get this before you receive the parcel. I am so glad you got the other safely. I could not lend a bound volume by book post. I remembered and prayed for by the dear good sisters of Mount Carmel is indeed a blessing. I received Holy Communion and confirmation on the 22nd of August. I took the name of Ignatia. This is an amazing, amazing thing to see. If you look here on the right side, you will see she even underlined it. She underlined her confirmation name. Saint Ignatius of Loyola, who was one of the founders of the religious order called the Society of Jesus, or the Jesuits, and became its first superior general at Paris in 1541, The Jesuit order is dedicated to teaching and missionary work. She says, the Archbishop gave me a rosary, blessed by, you'll see here, 12-Pope. I did some research, and it's possible she was referencing Pope Leo XII, who was Pope from 1823 to 1829. She says, and spoke most tenderly and earnestly of what we must strive to make our lives. Here in England, there is so much persecution and no kindness shown to Catholics that he said we needed the faith and strength of the apostles, always to keep firm and devoted. I think there's something beautiful in trying to be fervent as the apostles and being an example to those who deride us. And I'm very happy to strive in a humble way. And I notice there is such warm devotion among Catholics here. I shall someday go to the monastery again, and I should like indeed to visit one of the convents of the Carmelite order. It is a long distance, but sometime when the weather is cooler, I may go. I have written in haste, but I part to send my letter tomorrow morning, as to it shall not miss the next departure. She says, remember me kindly to all the dear nuns and tell them how happy I am to be remembered in their prayers. Dear sister, I hope you will get quite well again. I don't like to think of the day when we shall cease to write each other. Little Asia, her daughter, and the rest send their love to you, and Sister Stanny. I believe that is Sister Stanislaus Smith. Ever your loving friend, Asia Clarke. I just want to backtrack just a bit here to talk about the importance, obviously, of this first letter. The first thing that came out at me is that we now know she was confirmed in the Catholic faith on the 22nd of August, 1868, and she took the name Ignatia. We now have Asia's confirmation name, which is an incredible thing to discover. And she also says, she says here, in all three letters, she will always say in her parting, pray for me, sisters. You won't forget me, sisters. She's always, the three letters, you will see that they end almost very much the same in terms of how she reaches out to them and says, remember me in your prayers too. The second letter, from 2 Lansdowne Place, Brunswick Square. This is London, April 10th, 1869. Dear Sister Teresa, I have received 2 dear kind letters from you and have been most unkind in not answering soon. We are removed from our country home to the town, which is far less agreeable this time of year, but so convenient for us. One day of last week, we had a fearful day and were obliged to use gas lights until 2 or 3 o'clock. Friday is like a summer day at home, close and oppressive. The flowers are beautiful and abundant. The children and I heard mass today at the little chapel in, unfortunately, I wasn't able to decipher that word, attached to the hospital buildings. There is no statue or picture of the Blessed Virgin, and it seems so strange to us. We had a long and beautiful discourse about the Holy Father, his talks and necessities, and all the good he has done. How curious the nephew of the Archbishop should visit you and see the little photograph. I believe the word here is for England. I shall be so greatly pleased to meet with him on his return. I am glad too that Rosalie, this is her sister, called to see you, as she is truly good and is regarded by all of us who know her as the most patient, self-sacrificing person. She's had a lonely life of suffering physically, and in her earthly attachment, bears it all so resignedly and without complaint. Mother and she will be happier soon, I trust, but I so wish they would come to this country and leave behind some of their gloomy reflections. Obviously, she's talking about the assassination there. The superior of Notre Dame Convent, Philadelphia, will, I suppose, leave England for America. I'm going to see her in a few days to say goodbye. She has been to the other house at Namur, Belgium. Just a little note, in 1790, the Carmelites left Hoog Street, Belgium for Charles County, Maryland. And she says, and will surely take away with her home delightful recollections of the grand old churches and pictures she must have seen. I have so great a desire to go there, and perhaps I shall someday, for I have been beautifully blessed in all my wishes as well as my wants. I feel sometimes my heart felt to express with gratitude and love to God for all his mercies, for even in all the troubles, I have found such inner strength and consolation, and I do pray so earnestly that I may be ready to bear the cross that awaits me in the future. When I look at my family, I cannot but feel there will be sorrows and disappointments for me as for all others. Dear sister, I hope you will not find me neglectful or weak for not replying sooner to your dear letters, but I have lately been so hurried and confused with moving and furnishing our home and much less other things that took time and caused fatigue, that I idly put off from day to day writing to my own dear sister and to you. Tonight, I have written to both my sisters, and with fervent prayers, I commend to you both to the Blessed Mother in heaven, who is all love and compassion. She says, remember me kindly to all the good sisters, and accept for yourself the love of my little children and myself. Write soon to me, and believe me, your ever loving Asia. This second letter has some extraordinary parts to it. The first part I'm going to bring up is about her sister Rosalie, and how beautifully she writes about her, that she suffered physically. Could that be the scoliosis that I mentioned earlier? But she bears it all so resignedly without complaint. What a beautiful statement she talks about her sister. But also, there's a section here I feel sometimes my heart felt to express with gratitude and love to God for all his mercies, for even in any troubles, I have found such inner strength. This is a statement, this is a beautiful paragraph where she's talking to the sisters, where she's writing to the sisters about her devotion to her faith, and that she knows that her future, when she looks at the family, she knows there's a cross that she will have to bear. And yet she is saying that she has found such inner strength and consolation. I cannot feel there'll be such sorrows and disappointments for me as for all the others, but yet she says she has been beautifully blessed. What an extraordinary statement of Asia, of what we see of her right now, the love of her faith, and this is what's sustaining her. And also, again, we will take a little bit look, the last line in the letter here, to the Blessed Mother in heaven, who is all love and compassion. The Blessed Mother in Catholicism is Mary, and she suffered too when her son Jesus was crucified. So that's an extraordinary thing that she brings up, the Blessed Mother, who is compassion and love, yet she suffered too, like Asia is. And then again, the ending of this second letter, remember me kindly to all the good sisters, and accept for yourself the love of my little children and me, and write to me soon. I love the way she ends these letters when she reaches out to them. A little interesting fact that came up as I was researching this presentation. We do know that Asia was living in Boulogne-sur-Mer. Sur-Mer is of the ocean in France, as early as 1874. Remember that Asia wrote her book on her brother John in 1874, and in a letter to her friend Jean Anderson, she writes on December 6, 1874, for loneliness. My life is too lonely here to lose the memory of past happy days in my own country with beloved friends. I declare to you I would never have crossed the sea if I had known it was to separate me forever from my own land. So this letter, this next letter, the third and final, was written on March 22nd, 1875, from Boulogne-sur-Mer, 19 Rue Bassett. And you will see here, you can see at the top of the letter the address. And we're going to go back to the slide. And we can see here the address, 19 Rue Bassett, Boulogne-sur-Mer, France. Now, again, this is a modern, this is from Google Earth. You can see it from Google Earth. And this is a very modern picture. Obviously, we have mailboxes in the front. We've got recycle bin and looks like a call security button under the number 19. This is the address, right? She says, my dear sister, I was so glad to receive a letter from you. We've lived in this little French town for a year. So in 1874, she was at this address, and 1874 is when she wrote the unlocked book. So as we look at some of these windows here, it's to wonder if Asia was sitting at any of these windows looking out as she was writing her unlocked book. My dear sister, I was so glad to receive a letter from you. We have lived in this little French town for a year. The climate of France suits us all so much better than that of England, which is chilly, damp, and with a heavy atmosphere. The English are a cold and bigoted people and so intolerant to Catholics. Here it's like a different world. Everyone seems to have one faith, seems, I say, for even the English Protestants and their members here lose their frigidity and prejudice. They're fond of visiting our churches to hear the music and witness the imposing ceremonies and join the short processions quite devotedly. Consequently, she says, many become Catholics and others acquire a knowledge of the solemnity and beauty of our religion. Interesting. They also allow their children to go to convents and the schools taught by priests and brothers, because they acknowledge there is no education like this to be obtained at Protestant establishments. In England, Catholic schools are very favorably attended, and no Protestant would think of permitting their children to attend them. Religion is a universal topic in London, and bitterness and hatred are always uppermost when the Catholic religion is brought up. I know several good families, they're living in fear of having their religion known. They would forfeit much in consequence, and many poor people would lose their employment thereby. You cannot think how bitter the feeling is towards Catholics, and also towards the ritualists, who are neither one thing or the other. We have a beautiful cathedral here with a very ancient crypt, which everyone will visit on Holy Saturday. In all the churches, they observe the old customs of sending around the blessed bread. At the offertory, the sacristan carries the basket to all the congregation. Each one takes a small piece and making the sign of the cross with it, also with the token of friendship. Each Sunday, a member of the parish provides the bread, which is blessed during Mass. I like to see the priests in their Cossacks and broad hats. Why is it not allowed in America they should wear the proper dress? I am so proud that America has a cardinal, the Archbishop of dear old Baltimore, is made so important in the care of many. How greatly and with what solemn determination the Pope acts. Although a prisoner, how strictly he excommunicated those foolish noblemen of London who wrote their presumptions, letters to the newspaper, showing either their ignorance or their carelessness of faith. The act of turning off wealthy lords of England for a fault astounded English people. They wondered, Rome could afford to do so when the Pope needs means, great means. The intellect of England and so much desired the subrogation of England. One of these noblemen built these handsome churches, each dedicated to St. John of Jerusalem, and it is a liberal benefactor to all Catholic churches. I do not know if he retracted what he said or wrote. Some mornings I get up to see the Jubilee winding slowly up the hill to the cathedral. They go 3 days only if accompanying the parish they belong to, and are obliged to expand it to 15 if alone. In Paris, they say the sight is a grand one. The streets are thronged with people of every class visiting the churches in processions, precious relics being carried by the priests. A Protestant paper says there must be really something in a religion that can thus inspire people of every grade, life, every nation, trade professions, and shade of politics to leave their usual pursuits and unite in one common cause. At 6 o'clock, walking in the streets for miles on these bitter March mornings. The parish of St. Michael's in which we live will not make the Jubilee until May. My little Adrienne is 11 years old, and she had a beautiful idea come to her wise head. She thought, as our church is very poor and unfinished, that if she and her little friends could make a lottery of all their toys and could raise some money to help the cure, the priest. She uses the word cure. So I approved of it, and the two children worked every day at dressing dolls, making bookmarks, the two brothers of my little one sewing at canvas work, and the brother of little Marie making bags to fill with marbles. This went on for many days, so I offered to help, and we worked industriously. Then I sent the two girls out with a servant to get some little friends to take chances. The first day they bought 10 francs. Then I made them a book, and a day after day they have gone from door to door until now they have collected 90 francs. So you see, our lottery has grown to be a great affair, and I work constantly for it. Many ladies and shops have given presents, and all bless the children for their charitable purpose. They impress the people not to tell the curé or the vicar. So afraid are they being discovered. Now, instead of handing their bags of money, they intend to have a handsome, I believe the word is bearer, of St. Joseph made and presented to the curé. These two little girls made the collection in the church at the Mass of the Holy Child, Saint Alphonse, attended by the brother of each of them, and they were invited with the sacristy to receive a particular blessing afterward. The curate thinks them such devout girls and praises them so much to us, but he little dreams of what their busy little heads are doing now and how much ground their feet go over daily to please, as they say, dear Jesus and our cure. She says, I'm writing you such a long letter, but you must not weary of it. I love this particular line. Remembering how dear the ties are that bind me to my distant home. She's talking about Baltimore. And she says in this little side note here, and remember too, you have a pair of spectacles to help you, chiding the sister to make sure she has her spectacles. She says, I wish I could send you something very nice. Is there anything that you desire you cannot obtain in America? I must close my lengthy letter with my love to each and every sister, and most of all to your dear self. I think of you ever in my prayers and know you will not forget me. 1,000 times goodbye, sister, your loving Asia. The areas I would like to just bring up in this particular letter, obviously, she's talking a lot about, Catholics, the Protestants, England. We see her, her relentless side come out when she's talking about the Catholics and the Protestants. But also too, there's a section here about her little children and this little doll lottery that they did to raise money for the church. What does that say? This says that Asia is obviously bringing her children up, obviously in the Catholic faith, but they are embracing the faith, and they are devoted to the Catholic faith, just like she is. She is setting this incredible example for her children, and they are embracing it. I think that is just so incredibly beautiful. And again, the ending here where she says, I know you will not forget me. She's lonely. Again, that time, we know that she was growing in distance between her and her husband. She had lost 3 children. So she's reaching out to the sisters and she's saying, I know you will not forget me. Keep me in your prayers. It's so beautifully said. So these 3 letters, which are never been seen or revealed, to me, the areas, again, that are the most important are the love of her faith, the love of the Carmelite sisters, her children, and we now know her confirmation name as Ignatia. We're seeing a side of Asia, very strong side to her love of the Catholic faith, and again, I just thought that was so beautifully said. This was a gift, a set of masquerades. These were sent by Asia to the Carmelite Monastery in Baltimore, Maryland. These were a gift. These are obviously for the water and the wine. And you can see, obviously, it does look like they are silver. And thank you, Sister Constance, who mentioned she had these and would send me a picture, and she did for this presentation. Very exciting to see that, how beautiful. Look at what she's sending the sisters along with the mass books and things like that. Look at how beautiful these are. In conclusion, the Booths have a family plot in Greenmount Cemetery in Baltimore, Maryland. I have visited there many times. Most of the Booth family is buried there, with the exception of Edwin and brother Junius, and another brother who died when he was quite young, who was buried in England. Upon the death of Asia Booth Clarke in England in 1888, at the age of 52, she had asked her husband John and children to be buried in the Booth family plot in Baltimore. And so this is where she rests. And again, just steps away from her brother John, who's also buried there in an unmarked grave. A little bit of a haunting fact of history of a bond between the sister and the brother, her brother John, that they were reunited from across the sea to rest near one another, and they're bound together in the finality of death. You know, perhaps it was a guiding hand for me to discover these 3 letters, but it was Asia's words that compelled me to bring forth more of her untold story, but with respect and humility for the author and the respect and humility of the Carmelites that truly guided me in this endeavor. So now we have more of her story. We know now, we will see there's no lamenting in her words in these letters. All of her suffering and her loss, and again, estrangement from her husband. She just has words of devotion about her faith, the Carmelites, and her children. This is a part of Asia that we never knew before, yet we can hold on to now. And as part of her devotion, we can now welcome and embrace her, knowing her full name, Asia Friga Ignatia Booth Clarke, a fact no longer lost to history. Thank you very much.